Welcome to Algebra 2, Semester 2, Unit 7a, Section 8.5. This is Part 2. My tape ran out on the last one, so we're just finishing this off. It was a nice break for you probably anyway. This is page 5 of your notes. You'll find number 4 up here at the top. It says find the LCD and then calculate. Well, we have a denominator of 4x squared, and we have a denominator of 6x cubed. So again, I just look at this like we're making an invite list for a party, and we break these down. 4 breaks down to 2 and 2, and then x and x. This breaks down 6x cubed to 2 times 3 times x, x, x. Okay, when we make up our party list, our lowest common denominator, we have to invite both of these two x's because they were individually on those lists, so they must be twins. They aren't the same person. You wouldn't list the same person twice in your list of contacts. So we list both of these 2's, mark them out. Now this 2 is included in one of those, so we can mark it out. We don't need to include it again. Now we have a 3 that we need to include. And then we have 2 x's here, but we have 3 x's here. So we need to invite all 3 of these x's as separate contacts, assuming that these 2 are these 2. They fit within there. So there's our LCD. 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12, times x times x times x, which is x cubed. So our lowest common denominator will be 12x cubed. Okay, now the next thing we need to say is, well, what do we need to multiply that 4x squared to get 12x cubed? And I say, well, that must be that I'm multiplying 4x squared by 3x. 3 times 4 is 12, x times x squared is x cubed. So what I do to the bottom, I must do to the top to keep that equal. So I have a 1 times 3x. I bring down the plus, and now 6x cubed times what will give me 12x cubed. Oh, I know that that's simply just 2, so I take 9 times 2, and I'm almost done with the problem. There's no reason to get all worried about it being a fraction. Just treat it like 2 separate problems almost, the bottom and then the top. Okay, so we take 1 times 3x would be 3x. 2 times 9 would be 18. And we write it all over 12x cubed. Now remember, you can't reduce this 3x and this 12x cubed because 3x is not a factor. It is part of a binomial. So that is your final reduced answer. Okay, next problem. This one might look kind of scary to you, only because it's got trinomials on the bottom. I would suggest, before you even go into doing any more of this, is factor those down. We can see we can take the shortcut because there's a 1 out in front of that trinomial on the leading coefficient. So we simply have to ask ourselves, what 2 factors multiply to be a negative 48 and add to be 2? Well, if I list my factors of 48, and I know since it's negative, one's going to be negative, one's going to be positive. That means I'm actually subtracting them. I could go 1 and 48, that'd subtract to 47. 2 and 24, that would subtract to 22. 3 and 16, that's 13. I'm getting closer. 4 and 12, that's 8. 5 won't go in there, but 6 will. 6 times 8, there we go. The difference is 2. 8 is further from 0, so it takes the sign of that middle number. 8 and 6. Now I go over to this trinomial, and I go ahead and I factor it down. Same thing, I can do a shortcut there. And it's got a negative, so I know that I will have a negative and a positive here. I'm looking for what subtracts to be negative 16. What 2 factors of negative 16 subtract to be 6. And I look right at 8 and 2. 8 being further from 0, we'll carry the plus because that's what the middle term has. So there we go. Do you notice how both of these have x plus 8? That means that I don't need to repeat the x plus 8 in my lowest common denominator. My lowest common denominator will have x plus 8 listed only once. Doesn't need to be sent 2 invitations. He's on each of our contact lists, but we only need to send him 1. Now we bring down the x minus 6 and the x minus 2. Now it's really easy to see what I'm multiplying this by, because there it is. See how it's right there and it's there again. All that I'm multiplying it by is x minus 2. So I bring down the top, x plus 6, and I show I'm just going to multiply that by an x minus 2. Now I bring down this minus between them. And now over on this side I have x minus 2 and x plus 8. So the only thing that I needed to multiply it by was x minus 6. So I'm going to multiply the top by x minus 6. Okay. Now, you may want to use some scratch paper to foil those. So pause the video and go foil those. I'll put the answers here so that you'll have it when you come back. The reason that I leave the parenthesis around this second one is that it is being subtracted, so we need to remember and change all the signs before we combine these. So if we distribute this -1 throughout, we can switch this to a plus and actually switch their signs. So x squared minus x squared, those two would wipe out. 4x plus 14x would be 18x. Don't worry, I'm not forgetting the denominator, I'm just running a little bit short of room, so I'm squeezing it up here. I'll bring it down into the answer. So I have 18x from those two, and then -12 and -48 is -60. I see that I can factor that. I can factor out a 6. 6 goes into both those. So 6 times 3x minus 10 is what I have on the top of that fraction, and now I write the denominator on the bottom, x minus 6, x plus 8, and x minus 2. That's my final answer. So again, anytime we add or subtract fractions, we always have to get a common denominator. We have 16x here, and then we have x plus 24. X plus 24 can't break down any further, so I know I need both of these in my common denominator. I need 16x times x plus 24. Now, in order to change this to the lowest common denominator, I had to multiply by x plus 24. So I take the 11 and show that I'm going to multiply that by the x plus 24. In order to convert this x plus 24 to 16x times x plus 24, I multiplied by 16x. So I show this subtraction sign, I bring it between them, and then I show that I've got 9x times 16x. Now I go ahead and I multiply out the top, so I have 11x plus 264 minus 144x squared. That would be my top number. I can go ahead and bring down this this denominator, but first I want to write this in standard form. I'd have a negative 144x squared plus 11x plus 264 I want to get rid of that negative off that leading coefficient. So I multiply, well, the easiest thing to do is to factor out a negative x. So I change all the signs. I factor this -1 out to the front, and I have 144 x squared minus 11x minus 264. And then I just write this negative out in front of the entire fraction. I don't need to put the 1 there. 144x squared minus 11x minus 264 all over 16x times x plus 24. I like that negative coming out to the very front. It's just a nicer way to write all that. We have one more problem here. It's called the complex inequality. Or complex inequality. I'm so sorry. Complex fraction, because we have fraction over fraction. Again, what you've got is a divide there. So if you look back at how we did the divide problems, you could do it that way. I think an easier way is to multiply every term by the lowest common denominator. That will eliminate your fraction on top of the fraction. You'll still have a fraction overall, but it eliminates the complex. So our common denominator, you see an x plus 8 in those two, but then we also have an x. So we would be multiplying everything by x plus 8. And since we do the same thing to the top and the bottom, we're keeping this fraction equivalent. Now when we multiply this top fraction by x times x plus 8, the x plus 8's reduce, and we get 3x on the top. When we multiply the 6 over x plus 8 times x plus 8, the x plus 8's cancel and we get 6x. When we multiply the 7 over x by the x plus 8 times x, we get, the x's cancel and we get 7 times x plus 8. Okay, now all we have to do is simplify this bottom. Since we have terms that we need to add, we'll go ahead and simplify that. So we have 3x over 6x plus 7x plus 8. So we end up with 3x over 13x plus 8. That is our final answer. Okay, review these problems and be ready to come to class tomorrow and work on some of these with me.